Okay, what I have here is the answer sheet for the first worksheet in the GEP. I've created a kind of outline, 6 things that you should kind of use to grade them. Some of the answers are kind of ambiguous, so I wanted to make sure if you sit there, and the way I grade these types of things is I ask these questions and I go, can they do this? Yes, no, how much, and kind of go from there. Some of the answers are very specific, so I mean, yes, you can just count it correct or incorrect, however you want to interpret it. But one of the main goals here is that they have to understand the role of transposable elements and altering the genomes of these organisms. When that happens, of course, you alter the nature of the sequence in such a way that you can make it a pseudogene. It's no longer a functional gene. Has most of the sequence homology or similarity there, but it's no longer functional. They need to understand that concept, that these elements occur, but they've occurred historically without altering or without turning the gene into a pseudogene. Instead, it's still functional. It's now on a different allele, a mutant, but it might slowly evolve into something useful, something maybe completely different. But the problem with these transposable elements and these other elements, insertions and deletions that might be repetitive in the genome, and however they got there, it's not only transposable elements that can do this, but other things can cause what we call low complexity regions. And these low complexity regions are kind of something they have to deal with. And so part of this assignment is to learn to use the tools to take some of the guesswork out of comparing these sequences when you have this issue of low complexity regions. Now, what is a low complexity region? It's a region like all A's, all T's. Those would be extremely low complexity. There's not much difference in the sequence from one letter to the other. They're all the same. That would be the ultimate low complexity region, would just be a long stretch of A's or a long stretch of T's or something. But the idea here is these repetitive elements, they get put into sequences all over the genome, and when you do that, it makes it difficult for you to search, because if you have a piece of a newly sequenced piece of DNA, and you're going to take that sequence and you're going to search for something and it has repetitive elements in it, well, it's going to find all of the places that have the all the other sequences out there in the databases that have that repetitive element. You need to get those things out of there. You need the high complexity regions and compare those regions with other pieces. And it's important that the students understand this concept of searching for the high complexity regions and kind of getting rid of the low complexity regions if you can. So they need to learn to use the tools for this, but one of the things in this exercise is it shows you how getting rid of the low complexity regions can also be overdone in the sense that if you do this, cutting out all of these low complexity regions may allow you to miss something in your analysis. So that's what this actual exercise does, and it goes through all of the tools needed for taking out those repetitive elements and then seeing what kind of issues can arise. So in this, you look at the role of transposable elements, or just small elements, repetitive elements. Probably I should change this to just repetitive elements instead of, let me do that, because that's a better way to state this. All right, so repetitive elements, And then what tools are used to mitigate this? All right, that's going to be something called repeat masker and then the filters on BlastX. So that's what we're talking about here. There are filters in Blast, and then there's something we're going to use called repeat masker. Repeat masker, and those are the two tools here. So do the students understand splicing and how to account for it? One of the things we will be doing here is we're not going to actually find the splice sites or anything here at this point. We're just kind of making sure they understand splicing and how to account for it, how it's going to alter your sequence if you're looking at mRNAs versus brand new sequence and versus the amino acid sequences. Of course, the introns will be spliced out, and you're going to need to do that if you're going to be comparing your sequence to RNAs, and to if you're going to translate into mRNAs, you're going to have to get if you're going to translate into amino acids, and you have genomic sequences, you're going to have to get those introns out of there to find out what the amino acid sequence is. So it's just, we need to check to make sure they kind of get that and understand how what splicing is and why you need to get rid of the introns to be able to go from your genomic sequence, your raw sequence, to the amino acid sequence. Do the students understand the concept of a frame shift? That's something that you might want to explain to them, and how you can move one letter. If you delete or insert one, you have altered the reading frame. If they get that concept, that's really good. That's what we're kind of looking for here. That's a big deal because, of course, after you alter the reading frame, the amino acid sequence is going to be different for the rest of the translation. All right, do they understand how to interpret an alignment and the value of comparing your sequence to the sequences of other organisms? So in other words, you have an alignment. What does that tell you? What is the value of an alignment? Well, the alignment will tell you regions, one, that are important because they're conserved over evolutionary time. So those are probably the ones that are used for the function of the actual protein. Do they understand how to interpret it? Well, how do they, what is a gap? What is an insertion and a deletion, and what does that look like in the little alignments where you align the query and the subject sequence? So just when they're looking at it, make sure they know, they've given you some indication that they know what's going on in the alignments and what an alignment is. All right, now the other part is this exercise is just, can they use the tools? And then can they interpret the results and communicate it to you? Well, I've given you the answers here with as best of the answers that I can provide. We were not able to get the answers provided by the makers here, but I've gone through it and completed it as well as I know how to do. So I've given you as much information as I can. I wouldn't, some of these things are very, easily defined. This is the answer, okay? Some of the answers are, what is low complexity? That sort of question. They should try to answer that, grade them in your own judgment. If you understood it, then I guess they should get credit. If it doesn't make sense to you, they don't get credit. This one's pretty easy. There are no repetitive sequences detected here. That's very straightforward. And then it asks how many hits. Well, you had 2 here. Make sure they understand e-values. Make sure they understand they can they can click over here on the sides and go, when they see one of these, and go to the actual sequence and actually look at it by clicking here on the accession numbers. Well, let's see, what else should they know? We're going to use UniPro. It's just a website with more information about the protein that they're interested in. They should go there. They're going to go find a particular reference. They're going to be asked about what the results were. Not hard. They pretty much this particular question, number 6 here, should be pretty much exactly this. They may or may not have to add this. I added that in because I found it, but they should. The reference here is the correct one. What is the orientation of the swallow gene relative to our query? They're going in opposite directions. That's the answer there. But how do they know that? Well, they look at the numbers, the direction. One sequence is increasing, the other sequence is decreasing in location number. Look at the matches. I wouldn't be too hard on them here at all. There are several segments missing. If they get in these correct regions, that's probably fine. If they had weeks to do this, I would say go find the exact numbers, but they don't, and I wouldn't expect them to go. They may give you exact numbers if they're in these regions. That I think I would give them credit. Here, same idea. We have a region of low complexity with 2 amino acids here, and it was masked, and it shouldn't have been. And so that's the idea here. What are the limitations of the software? It can't. It's designed to find low complexity regions and cut them out. And if that sequence happens to use that low complexity region and it's significant, well, you're going to get the wrong answer if it was important. But by the nature of this type of analysis, the computer programs just can't give you the correct answer every time. And this is a real problem, by the way. If you don't know, I've been working with Dr. Grauer on a lot of the results, and from really high-powered papers in Nature, and they're like and in genetics, and the people just don't know how to use the software. It's amazing. So this is a problem. If you don't know how to use the software, you're going to miss some things and get some things wrong. But what can you do? The BlastX, your alter your final score, projecting or rejecting the hits. You're going to get too many hits if you don't. If you don't mask, you're going to get too many hits. If you mask too many things, you reject the hit and don't get enough. So it's too much of one, too little of another. And that's why humans have to look at it to get the correct answer. You can't just put it in a program yet. Just alignment, change that. And looking at these results, don't grade them hard on this because there's no telling. I don't know what the real answers they gave on, and if you spent weeks on this, you could probably come to the conclusion that there were 4, there were 5, but it depends on how they interpret the gaps between the sequences. You would have to actually do quite a bit more analysis to find out exactly. You could go to the papers probably directly and find out, but I did not have time for that, so I would grade them really loosely on this. If they go and research it and find the papers on it, man, I would say give them lots of extra credit or something. I have no idea, but the ones that overachieve there, and if they went to and found the exact locations, that would be impressive. How would you would have received many more hits from the other genes? This is just the idea that what are the problems with repetitive elements? The fact is that you're going to get too many hits if you leave the repetitive elements in. You're going to be finding similarity with genes that simply have the same repetitive elements, and therefore they're going to look like they're similar, but in a real sense they're not. They've just been infected, I guess is a way to say it, by these repetitive elements, and so therefore you suddenly get similarity when it's really not in the functional part of the gene. It's just that they've got a lot of the same repetitive elements. Try to make sure they understand that and why you want to get rid of those repetitive elements. This one, they just need to understand what a ref-seq is. mRNAs. These are the likely exons, and understand that the introns would be in between these exons. So if they give you anything in between these sequences, I would say it's correct. I would make sure that they do not give you anything inside these sequences. There may be multiple answers to this. I would be fine. Just don't. There shouldn't be anything inside here. So there, if I said this was the exon, this is asking where are the introns. I would be happy as long as they don't give me anything inside between these regions. I would count it as a correct answer. Some regions are matched well. The reading frames, they need to understand what a reading frame is and how it's altered, and how it can alter the rest of the protein. So if they can talk about that, at least, or if they recognize that that's the issue. And stop codons, same here. So the last couple of parts are looking for that sort of thing. A pseudogene, if you're not aware, it's a non-functional gene, no longer does what it was supposed to do. It's been altered. Typically, they are altered by transposable elements. And they may produce an mRNA. They may even produce a protein, but it no longer has the function. Some people define pseudogenes differently than other people. Some, it can no longer produce a protein. Others, it says it no longer produces a functional protein. So that's kind of a tricky answer here, because there are, depending on your definition, you could have different answers for this. Let's see, based on all evidence, how would you annotate the sequence? They should ultimately what we will do is we will align the nucleotide sequences and translate it into all reading frames, and then they will take each translation and then go backwards. In other words, you need to go forward in transcription and translation, and then you compare it to things, and then you go backwards, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do here. We'll also add additional features, which will give us some landmarks to look at. Look for splice sites to help us find the exons. Look for your transcription start site, your termination sequences, if you can find them, things like that. They'll give us more landmarks so we can compare things. Uncommon amino acids, which I find to be really useful when doing this, but I actually haven't seen that much in these analysis. But looking for uncommon amino acids in these sequences when you're comparing them is really useful. It gives you landmarks for where things are, and how you can adjust everything. Where are the introns and exons? Well, let's look through and find all of these uncommon amino acids, or for finding out what has happened between one allele and then the other allele within an organism, or if you're looking at it when you've had a gene that's copied, or between organisms, and you're looking to see how they've changed over evolutionary time. But this is the idea here. Take a look at it. If you have any questions, send me an email. We can Zoom, whatever. Since this is their first time here, most of this is BLAST, but they are using repeat masker as well, and they do go to Swiss Pro and just look at the results. Find a reference here and some other things. But most of it's very straightforward. You can just work through the worksheet if you like, kind of like look at it and hear the answers to the questions that they ask. I think it would be useful if you did work through the worksheet, and not completely, but just look at the answers I give, and then look at the screenshots. So in other words, this screenshot was very useful, so I put that one in. But just look at the screenshots that are associated with each of these questions. I think that'll help you out when you're trying to evaluate their papers. And these are just suggestions, things that I thought were important in what you were supposed to get out, what the students are supposed to get out of this assignment.